سبيل الدموع سبيل مريح تنهدى يا صاحي كي تستريح وبث الدعاء الخفي الصريح.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome to the second part of two-part series looking at the prayer times for Isha and Fajr according to the UK Muslims. And part one, I spent a great deal of time exploring the various madhahib positions on Fajr and Isha, both under normal circumstances and under exceptional circumstances. We're now going to turn to the literature review and to see how scholars have been trying to understand this. And that was obviously, I'm here talking specifically about sort of contemporary scholars. And when this literature review was carried out, we could see that, there was some observational data that I came across as well. But they weren't from an academic institute or published in a peer-reviewed journal. And what it tended to be is that each one tried to sort of discredit each individual's position. And this is what I was sort of saying when I introduced this, that sadly it's not become an area of research anymore. It's just become an area to prove one's point. And really that's not what it should be. So, and how can they discredit? Well, those who claim to see Subha Sadiq at 18 degrees, they suggest that the light on the eastern horizon, which is claimed to be seen at 15 degrees, is too bright to be the start of Subha Sadiq. Okay, so they're saying you're seeing Subha Sadiq too late. We've already seen it at 18 degrees. So yes, you're seeing light on the eastern horizon at 15 degrees, but that's because Subha Sadiq has really grown. And on the other hand, those who see the claim Subha Sadiq is at 15 degrees, they say that the light which you saw at 18 degrees is actually Subha Kadhib. So we're not really getting anywhere there. And so those observations which have been sort of assessed using academic norms have been the ones that I've explored. Having said that, one could draw a conclusion that there is no fixed depression that can be utilized, and this is discussed by Yallop and Hohenkirk in their 1996 paper and argued by Miftahi in 2004 and to some extent Shaukat in 2012. However, as we'll see, that would go against the position of the fuqaha, because we've seen that the fuqaha did used to associate astronomical actual degrees of depression with prayer times. And also, we're after a fixed value because we want to make timetables, and it's going to be very difficult if we say, well, actually it could be anywhere. So even if this is a precautious one, then that'll be welcomed to make things easy for us. Shaukat has suggested that the latitude and the season needs to be taken into consideration when determining prayer times as their variables. And this has also been argued recently in some work that I've been involved in. But this can't be proven from the body of astronomical literature, nor has the formula been explained on first principles either in the paper or upon request by me in order to critically assess it. Yet most of the experts in astronomy are saying that astronomical twilight is 18 degrees. It does not get any darker, and that's that's a start point. So, and again, these formula which are being presented by Shaukat are based on observations which have not been peer-reviewed, and in fact some have criticized them. So we're in some sort of bother there. So let's accept certain views, and the two views which are robust and grounded in sound understanding of the classical text is one, that Fajr is at 15 and Isha is at 18, and both Fajr and Isha are at 18. They're the two. We have other views, add half an hour, add an hour, do this, do that. We've had all sorts of explanations as to how we should move from Maghrib to Isha. Can't really find anywhere which is really rooted in fiqh and astronomy apart from these, which is one that Fajr is 15 and Isha is 18, and the other that both are at 18. So I'm going to discuss these two in detail now. Position 1, which is Fajr at 15 and Isha at 18, and position 2, which is going to be about Fajr at 18 and Isha at 18. So Qasimi has written extensively in this area, and he's got a paper titled Kashf al-Satar and Awqat al-Isha wal-Fajr. And in fact, many of his papers as well, he's written on this topic, and he draws the following conclusions. He says zodiacal light cannot be considered as Fajr al-Kadhib. The reason why he says this is twofold. One, that it can be seen after sunset, and that it appears for a few months 2 times in the year. Whereas in the case of Fajr al-Kadhib, before dawn, first of all, Fajr al-Kadhib is before dawn rather, and it is seen throughout the year. Another point as well, which is of a recent text which is due to be published soon, is that when Rasulullah ﷺ went to Medina, when fasting was made compulsory, then historically, if we look back, there was no zodiacal light in those 2 months. So therefore, what was the Messenger ﷺ referring then? Clearly he was not referring to zodiacal light when he was referring to Fajr al-Kadhib. But I won't jump the gun too much, because that research is soon to be published, and it will be documented in full. 18 degrees cannot be considered as Fajr al-Sadiq, as there is no light before it. It must be 15. By quoting the commentary on al-Bayruni's text, he states that he's referring to al-Fajr al-Kadhib, not al-Fajr al-Sadiq, as understood by others. Imam Ibn Abidin, as quoted above, states 3-degree difference between the 2 Fajrs. If we accept 18 degrees as Fajr al-Sadiq, then we would have to assume 21 is Fajr al-Kadhib. There is no such phenomenon at that depression. And we've seen similar arguments being put forward by Baghvi and by the Supreme Court of Pakistan in Islamabad, both in 2007, with respect to the Fajr prayer. We have an in-depth study carried out by Muhammad ibn Musa al-Misri, and this includes analyzing the ahadith, which not only detail the description of Fajr, but also those which detail the acts which took place when the first adhan was called by Sayyidina Bilal radiallahu anhu, which is attributed to Fajr al-Kadhib, and then the second by Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Umar Maktoum, which is attributed to Fajr al-Sadiq, and the surah which was recited in between, and the light around the Sahaba as they left. So he explains this in great detail. Then astronomical data and observational data were utilized, which led Musa to conclude that Fajr al-Sadiq takes place between 14.2 and 16.5. He also challenged the position of the calculated Cairo timetable for Isha, which was based on 18 degrees to a slightly earlier time, most likely around 15 degrees, which corresponds most likely with his legal school's position as being of Ahmad, as is most probably of the Shafi school. Al-Mustafa in 2005, he carried out a detailed study in Saudi Arabia using high-definition cameras and astronomical apparatus with detailed statistical analysis. And this led him to the conclusion that on average the sun's depression was 14.6 degrees, with a minimum of 14 and a maximum of 15.1. Ubay Khan mentions the same or very similar research as that was already mentioned, and he came up with similar values. Imam Uthmani, mentioning in his text I'la Sunan, he states that while citing the commentary of Imam al-Juhmani, that it is known from experience that the beginning of Subh and the end of Shafaq is when the sun's depression is 18 degrees. The super commentary writer says that this is the common view. He then quotes 2 other positions of lesser views of 17 and 19. That is the beginning of Fajr al-Kadhib. As for the start of Fajr al-Sadiq, it is said to be when the sun's depression is 15 degrees. Uthmani answers the question put to him with respect to the differentiating the 2 Fajrs, and he references the commentary of Al-Jarmini, in which is quoted here, and the commentary says, it is known with experience that the first Subh, which is Subh Kadhib, and the last Shafaq, which is Shafaq Abyad, is when the sun's depression is 18 degrees. The super commentary writer says this is the common position. In some texts of Abu Rayhan, it is 17, a lesser opinion that it is 19. This is at the beginning of Subh Kadhib. As for the beginning of Subh Sadiq, then it said that it occurs when the sun's depression is 15 degrees. This Abu Rayhan is referring to is Imam al-Bayruni, whose text will be discussed again in the next section. So you can see here clear evidence that the Subh Sadiq is 15 and the Shafaq Abyad is 18. There's another view which gives 18 to both, And again, the scholars use the following to justify that Fajr is similar to Isha in that it's also 18. And we have this recorded. And we can see in Ruh al-Ma'ani mentions قرب الشمس إلى أفق الشرقي بمقدار معني وهو في مشهور 18 جزءا. So this is in Ruh al-Mani. And we also have in إيضاح القول عن الأفق 18 من درجة من دائرة. And in al-Jarmini, which we've already mentioned, which has been interpreted in slightly different ways. So in these cases above, a subha could be, it just mentions the word subha. It doesn't mention subha sadiq or kadhib. So it could quite be easy that it's referring to subha kadhib or sadiq. And when we look at the versions of the second and third statement, we have found in a number of sources, as we've already quoted in Bayruni, that Imam al-Jarmini has mentioned that the first Fajr is Fajr al-Kadhib. And the last Shafaq is Shafaq al-Kadhib. So this discussion of Imam Bayruni has been somewhat misunderstood. He states the following, which clarifies his position after mentioning the 80 degrees for Fajr. He mentions that when those who state regarding those individuals who pray Fajr before the sun has reached 16 degrees and 30 minutes, then his prayer is invalid, then they have overstepped and exceeded what is correct. If they did that, then that would mean that they also think it is permissible to eat up to 16 degrees and 30 minutes. He considers this position to be contradictory to the position of Ijma. So he is adopting 18 degrees for both Fajr and Isha. This is supported by a number of astronomers and fuqaha, which he cites in his text. He does, however, mention in a number of places difference between the mutaqaddimun who adopted 18 degrees and the mutaakhirun who vary between 16 and 21. As above, he states that those who adopt less than 17 are going against consensus. So that's the position for 18 and 18. Here's some recent studies that I myself have been looking at. Imam Ibn Abidin mentions, I remember, if you can recall back to the first episode, I mentioned this very much at the beginning, that ذكر العلامة المرحوم الشيخ خليل الكاملي في حاشية على رسالة الأسطرلاب للشيخ مشايخنا علامة المحقق علي أفندي الداغستاني أن التفاوت بين الفجرين وكذا بين الشفقين الأحمر والأبيض إنما بثلاث درج. So what he mentions here is a particular risala. It's called Risala al-Astarlab, which was written by Imam Ali Afandi al-Daghestani. And this text was relied upon by one of the greatest Imams of later times, which is Imam Ibn Abidin. And this manuscript has not been published. And alhamdulillah, I was fortunate enough through a colleague to locate a copy of this manuscript. And its text is very difficult to read. But another colleague, mashallah, we managed to sort of work it out together. And in here it clearly says that the relevant section he mentions is that the Fajr al-Kadhib and Sadiq and the setting of a Shafaq Ahmar and Shafaq Abyad, he mentions most likely the use of an astrolabe and a star from the spider star constellation, which is now referred to as Arniya constellation, near the bottom of the constellation of Virgo. However, it's doubtful that it's the same group of stars, as these are faint and other stars are better to use for helical setting, because that's what they were using, helical setting. He states if it's the star's position in the western sky is over 18, then al-Fajr al-Kadhib will not occur. If it is less than 18, then it will occur. And if it is on 18, then that is when Fajr al-Kadhib takes place. Also, if its position in the eastern sky is less than 18, then a Shafaq al-Abyad will not occur. If it is on 18, then this will be the end of its occurrence, and if it is more than, it has already disappeared. If 15 was used in place of 18 in these places above, then one would achieve al-Fajr al-Sadiq and al-Shafaq al-Ahmar. The most precautious view is to consider al-Fajr al-Sadiq as 14 and for Shafaq al-Abyad as 16, as it is obvious to see. That's an interesting point, because this is the very risala, this is the very manuscript which Imam Ibn Abidin is using. And then we have the use of an astrolabe, which I've drawn on there, and which is very different to how we've been considering, because it actually measures the distance of a sky. And you know, I hope you've got the paper yourself, you'll be able to see the diagram. It's mentioning the actual distance of the star from the horizon, and then this arc which it falls upon. An explanation is there as to whether it's going to be 18 or 15, and I've drawn a table for you there. Well, it does also raise another point. Now, whereas we are talking about the depression of the sun beneath the horizon when associating with 15 degrees, 18 degrees and 12 degrees, that might not be what the fuqaha were writing about when they were mentioning 12, 15 and 18 degrees. Because if they were using an astrolabe, then what they're looking at is the star helical rising compared to the horizon. They're measuring that, and that could be something altogether different, which would give altogether different conclusions. So therefore, how much dependence we can have on the discussions of the fuqaha and the astronomers of the past when they may have been using different instruments altogether. What we can then do is based it on observations that have already been discussed. So we take this 3-degree difference between the two, and I have at great length discussed this difference between Fajr al-Sadiq and Fajr al-Kadhib, about how it is in Imam Bayruni's text, and you'll see a great detail explaining this particular point. So first of all, he sets out describing the 3 types of Fajr. So the first one is Fajr al-Kadhib, which is described as a wolf's tail, thin near the horizon and broader as it goes up. There's no religious obligations associated with this, nor any daily human activity. The second type is the one which spreads across the horizon and causes animals and humans to start their daily activities, and also certain acts of worship, i.e. Fajr prayer, are based on this. And the third type is a redness followed by the rising of the sun. Like the first type, this has no religious obligations either. He then sets out to explain the similar events on the other end of the day, and the observations are similar as the cause is one, which is the movement of the sun. But this is now in reverse order. So the first time is a redness of this which takes place, which, if you remember, was the last type of Fajr. Yeah, it's the first type of Shafaq. And the second is the whiteness then which spreads across the horizon, which is the whiteness that we refer to when Fajr starts. These two are the ones in which the ulama differ as to which causes the prayer to be obligatory. And the third one is described like a wolf's tail, which normally brings about the end of the day. He mentions that people are unaware of this because they're usually asleep by then. So the two Fajr and Shafaq are considered to be similar. However, there is some difference due to the awareness of the people based on their daily habits. So the time of Subh is the usual time that preparations are made for journeying and preparations are made for the daily business activities. So people are waiting for the day to start. So this is apparent to them, but this is not. As we've seen at the beginning of Imam Bayruni's section, the second Fajr, which is considered as Fajr al-Sadiq, is considered a time when people leave their homes and go about their business. Therefore, the Subh in the sentence above must be referring to the first Fajr. Al-Kadhib cannot be meaning anything else because that's the only time that they're going to leave the home. He completes the sentence that this is apparent but this is hidden. This must refer to the Fajr al-Sadiq is apparent as people are awake making preparations and they see the light in the sky. Whereas the concealed one could possibly be referring to the time of a Shafaq Abyad. They are not aware as they have returned home soon after the sun has set and are making preparations for retiring for the night. This interpretation does fit as he is referring to prayer times, and Fajr al-Sadiq is apparent and discernible as the folk are awake, awaiting for the start of the day so that the prayer time is not a problem. But Isha time is not, as they have returned home after a day's work, which normally takes place when the sun is set, can't work in the dark, so they've come home, but Isha time does not start when the sun is set. It's Maghrib time which starts. So they're now come home, eating, busy with getting themselves prepared to go to sleep. And it could be, so this is why they might not see this Isha time. But it could also be made to reference to Al-Fajr al-Kadhib, which is apparent as the folk are awake, and Shafaq al-Kadhib, in which the folk are not aware of. So that's also a possibility. So there's two possibilities here. This seems, however, less likely, as it is irrelevant for folk, as they're aware of Shafaq al-Kadhib or not, is not no association with anything. In fact, most individuals are asleep. So coming to some sort of conclusion from Imam Bayruni's book or text, it is referring to Fajr al-Sadiq and Shafaq al-Abyad, as the people need to know these times for prayer purposes, and as such has been determined to be 18 degrees. Or it is referring to Fajr al-Kadhib, that 18 degrees is Fajr al-Kadhib, and Shafaq al-Abyad is 18 degrees, as the people need to wake up in order to prepare for the daily activities and prayer which occurs at Fajr as-Sadiq, when they've reached home and they're waiting for the night prayer. The second interpretation seems equally appropriate. The 15 and 18, 15 for Fajr and 18 for Isha. Why? Because the mention that the people were aware of Fajr as-Sadiq, but unaware of Shafaq Abyad because of their lifestyle. So the need was to know the Qadib so that folk could get ready for the day and be patiently waiting for the time of a Sadiq, so as not which not only brought about the prayer time, but the farmer and the tradesman were set off for their daily toils. So when they returned at night and the sun had set, they're waiting for Isha before retiring for the night. As they were preoccupied with completing the effects of their daily affairs and preparing for the night, they need to know the Isha time. Another point to support this is the position of Al-Jahmini's point earlier, when he mentions that Imam Biruni's position with respect to Fajr al-Qadib to be 17 degrees. Now he's mentioning Imam Biruni's position to be 17 degrees, even though he mentions that the common position is 18 degrees, which could also be a view that Imam al-Biruni held. So that's a key point. Now zodiacal light is something which is associated with Subh as-Sadiq. It is possible that it can be zodiacal light, can be Fajr al-Qadib, and it can also be Shafaq al-Qadib, because it mentions that this is sometimes called the false dawn, and the autumn, okay, it comes and it extends up from the western horizon a couple of hours after sunset. So this shows that zodiacal light is also seen after sunset, and we mentioned that there's three types of Shafaq: the redness, the whiteness which disappears, and then this tower column of whiteness which appears and disappears. It's a possibility, but recently some discussions with a colleague has shown that that might not be the case, especially when we're talking about Ramadan with the Prophet ﷺ, in which he has some data in which it was not possible to see the zodiacal light in Medina. So what we have now is lots of data for you, which is carried out of research, observational research, which has then been published in peer-reviewed journals. And we're just going to have a look at that. Now in this table form, page 38, you'll be able to see I've mentioned the latitude, northern latitude, and the longitude, which is of eastern. I mentioned the elevation of where the observations were taking place and the location. Whether it was in a desert, near a sea, or where it was. What method was used? Was it the naked eye? Was it using a camera? Was it using photoelectric instruments? What was it for? What degree of depression did they get? And who were the authors? And if I were just to rattle through the degree of depression here, and this is on twilight, okay? All this is on twilight. For Fajr, okay? We see 14.7, 15.5, 14 to 15.5, 14.5, 13.43, 14.5, 15.6 to 16.7, 14 to 16, 14 to 15.5, 12.6 to 15, 12.3 to 14.5, 14.46 to 14.86, 12.46 to 13.96, 16.75, and 14.7. Seems to be quite a spread around the 14-15 mark. Another paper used a portable photometer in which they found a 15 to 17 solar dip for Fajr in Indonesia. And it was very much different to what the Indonesian ulama had said, which was 20 degrees. So what he did was he was pushing for his argument was that from his research it was nowhere near that. We had another bit of research carried out in the peninsula Malaysia, in which the solar depression for Isha was 17.3 to 19.5, which is around the 18 mark. This correlates with more work in Malaysia this time, in the east, and they found a depression of 17.99, okay, which is pretty close to 18. A recent study which is going to be published in a book which I've just read, and it's a good book to buy in this particular area, by Dr. Asim Yusuf, in which he carried out some observations in Exmoor on a dark sky reserve in Somerset between August 2012 and August 2013, in which 20 successful observations were carried out, and the following was determined. 14.5 for the first light, 13.5 for the light to spread, 12.5 for the light to spread widely, 15 to 16 for the disappearance of Shafaq Abyad, and 12.5 for the disappearance of Shafaq Ahmar. And we've seen some other work that Dr. Shahid Merali is doing with a CCD imagery to determine Fajr, which has been positioned all a couple of years ago now, or in Birmingham, and is now currently positioned in York to gather data together and seeing averaging around 12.3 to 15, around 13.4. There's also some discussion by both Dr. Shahid Merali and by Dr. Asim Yusuf suggesting a seasonal and latitudinal changes. But again, this seems to be more a case of the pollutants which are around rather than a real astronomical change taking place in northern and seasonal situations. As when I've talked to a number of professors on astronomy, they're quite adamant that the astronomical twilight, nautical twilight, these are fixed irrespective of what season you are in and what latitude you are in. The only difference is how they're being perceived by the observer. That's the difference, and that perception is due to the pollutants in the sky, which can vary depending on the season, and obviously can vary depending on the latitude and how much sky you're having to see through in order to determine that. Anyway, that brings me nicely to my conclusion, okay? And I'll read the sort of conclusion to you and the recommendations that I made. So the first conclusion that I've drawn from this study is that a specific depression of the sun may not be absolutely related to the phenomena observed at Fajr and Isha time. However, the need for a timetable for the masses requires at least a precautious position which is calculated for the ease of practicality, and this position has been validated by Imam Ibn Abidin rahmatullah alayh. Any fiqhi decisions must be based on the four schools of fiqh for the sake of accuracy, reliability, and to meet the needs of the majority. Imam Ibn Abidin states that there is a 3-degree difference between the two Shafaq and the two Fajr. Hanafi position on Isha is a Shafaq al-Abyad, and on Fajr it is the light spread on the eastern horizon. Shafi, Maliki and Hanbali positions on Isha is Shafaq al-Ahmar, and on Fajr it is the light spread on the eastern horizon. The former Hanafi position on times when Isha is not present is not to pray at all. The latter and the current position is to pray qadha after Subh Sadiq. However, the practice of the Hanafi scholars is actually on the Shafi'i position. This can be considered valid due to 3 reasons. Firstly, ta'ammul on this position over the years has given it legal validity. Secondly, to wait until Fajr would be difficult. And thirdly, this will bring about unnecessary confusion amongst the masses, and this is the position of some senior UK ulama. The Shafi position in these circumstances, which the remaining 2 schools have adopted, is to estimate Isha and specify a fixed time for it in which it should be performed. Shafi and with Maliki following base their calculations on the nearest countries that continues to have Isha. Hanbali look at the nearest days where they had Isha. Fajr al-Kadhib, even though I've put this in stronger words, I'm going to sort of weaken that conclusion. Fajr al-Kadhib seems to be zodiacal light. Exploring alternative suburb for start time of a fast and its completion should only be investigated when there is insufficient time to eat. We can set 30 minutes as a value for that. Observational data from non-peer-reviewed journals has not been included as it was considered controversial and impossible to determine an accurate view. Those of the 18 view considered the view of observing Fajr at 15 degrees as erroneous, as in their view it was too bright. On the other hand, those of the 15 degree view considered the view of observing Fajr at 18 degrees as erroneous, as in their view it was Fajr al-Kadhib. 18 degrees as a solar depression for Isha was agreed by those who were articulating from a sound understanding of the classical text. Al-Fajr al-Sadiq was contested, so 18 degrees has been accepted. Al-Fajr al-Sadiq was contested. One view was of 18 degrees and the other of 15 degrees. It was understood from interrogating the classical texts of both fiqh and astronomy and a large number of experiments carried out and reported in peer-reviewed journals, 15 degrees was the correct position for Fajr as-Sadiq. In exceptional circumstances, Isha is to be prayed. Most are of the view as late as possible, and 11 p.m. has been decided upon. In exceptional circumstances, Fajr is to be prayed. Some are of the view it should be the last time in the city or country that Fajr occurred. Others are of the view it should be half of the night. Recent studies in Exmoor, UK revealed that Fajr as-Sadiq took place around 15 degrees in some occasions, at least the initial sighting. Recent studies in Birmingham revealed that Fajr as-Sadiq took place around 13.4 degrees. However, more interestingly, the solar depression based on the observation was found to vary due to season, which supports taking into consideration latitudinal and seasonal factors. Having said that, requests have been made to analyze these formula at first principles, and at time of publish, the author had not received those details. This was published for your information. If I can find the date. Maybe I'll find the date sometime. Where is it? I would have thought it would have been straight after there, but I've got a feeling I've put it. Oh, there it is. Because well, would you believe it? I can't find the date. One last shot before you give up on me. Ah, there we are. It's 21st of April 2016 is when I put this together. So it's been nearly a year since, and as yet I still haven't received the details. Also, as mentioned earlier, these formulae are based on observational data which has come under criticism and has not been peer-reviewed, and as a result cannot be verified. Finally, it is the view of the author, as supported by astronomers, that this is based on the atmosphere and not some real astronomical effect. Okay, that's what's recorded there. Next, I want to make some recommendations as to what people should do. Well, the first thing people should do is they should be discussing this with their masajid as to what timetable the masjid is following, and at the end of the day they want to follow the correct understanding. And this research is available for you on the website that I mentioned, so you can take a look at it and criticize it if you feel it's worthy for criticism, and see if there's anything that you disagree with, but the information is there for all to observe. So the recommendation the author makes, because I've had numerous individuals contact me for recommendations, so I've included it within the text, is Isha not prayed before 18 degrees for the Hanafi in normal circumstances. This is based on the school's position of Shafaq Abyad and will be between the following dates: August the 18th to March the 25th, where Isha will not be after 11 p.m. This time of 11 p.m. is considered sufficiently late without bringing difficulty upon the people by some senior UK scholars. However, it would be incorrect, it would not rather be incorrect, however, it would not be incorrect if 15 degree was adopted in these days for the sake of consistency and ease, as it is a position amongst the Hanafi and is the position of the other schools. Isha not prayed before 15 degrees for the Hanafi in difficult, or as we've called them, extreme circumstances. This is based on the lesser position. Sorry, this is difficult, sir. I was right the first time. Not extreme circumstances. Extreme circumstances, Isha does not occur either due to the disappearance of Abyad or the disappearance of Ahmar. This is talking about difficult circumstances where Ahmar is disappearing, but Abyad has ceased to disappear. This is based on the lesser position of the Hanafi school and the position of the other three schools of a Shafaq Ahmad disappearing, and will be between August the 9th to the 18th and March the 25th to May the 5th, where Isha will not be after 11 p.m. The reason for the move is in order to maintain a sizable congregation, and for the weaker of the community who may find it difficult to stay awake, then 15 degrees may be adopted, which is a position of the other schools in all circumstances. That means Isha prayer can be prayed on sound positions from the Hanafi school between August the 9th to the 5th of May. That is a total of 269 days. making up 74% of the year. So for 75% of the year, not a problem, everything is good, everything is halal. We're meeting the Hanafi school's position and everything is sound. When Shafaq Ahmad exists, but it is after 11 p.m. But what if Shafaq Ahmad disappears after 11 p.m.? It's still disappearing, but it's disappearing at half 11, 12, 12:30 at night. Between the dates May the 6th to May the 25th and July the 17th to August the 8th, that's a total of 43 days. In these days, the sabab for Isha exists. So really, technically, we should be praying Isha at that time. So if you pray at home in those particular days, then that's the time to pray Isha. But to seek ease, and also in order to maintain the Jama'at, the congregation, in these days the sabab for Isha exists. However, reputable senior UK scholars have given their verdicts that one may pray at 11 p.m. due to unnecessary difficulty. Now one might say, well, hold on a second here. Shafaq Ahmad is still disappearing. How can we pray Isha when Isha time hasn't come in? And it's a fair, valid point. And that's the position that I adopt, and that's the position I practice. But, you know, it's a difficulty on people to actually do that. So scholars have accepted, senior scholars have given fatwa on 11 p.m. And this is based on the precedent of the people of Bulgar and Bukhara. Three positions can be adopted in these cases. One is you pray Isha when the start time occurs, which is the position that I normally adopt. So sometimes you're praying Isha 11:15, 11:20 is going later, half 11, 11:45, 12, it gets later and later. Or you pray Isha at the end time, you get up just before Subh Sadiq. When you get up just before Subh Sadiq, well not just before, but 15-20 minutes before, you pray your Isha at that time because you're still in Isha time. Then you pray your witr, then you wait until Fajr time begins, and you pray Fajr at the beginning time. And this is like Jamasuri, which the Ahnaf permit, which is praying one salah in its end time and one salah in its beginning time. Or the third thing is that you pray Isha and Maghrib in Maghrib time, okay, as Jama Taqdeem. This is quite a point. Even though the most accommodating of schools, namely the Hanbali, does not permit it due to the need for sleep. They won't allow Jama Taqdeem for the need for sleep. However, due to these challenging circumstances, the method can be adopted, but then certain conditions have to be followed, and I outlay the conditions. The three conditions are: you make intention for joining Maghrib and Isha. So when starting Maghrib, and in sequence, in other words, Maghrib before Isha, you pray Isha immediately after Maghrib. You leave no time in between. One cannot pray the Sunnah Muakkada or Nafal in between, nor sit for dhikr or talking. Some time can be given for a quick wudu, or if something needs to be said about the prayer. The Sunan will be prayed in order after the Fard of Isha. The Sharia compliant reason is in existence at the beginning of both prayers. As has been mentioned previously, even though tiredness is not mentioned as one of these reasons, however, due to the great general difficulty because of the lateness of Isha based on our distance from the equator, we accept it as one in our circumstances. So we had a sound position between the dates for Isha praying at 18 and for the dates Isha praying at 15. The only issue arose when Shafaq Ahmad was disappearing after 11 p.m. So when Shafaq Ahmad was disappearing after 11 p.m., then it became an issue. We had three options. Option one, which is an option that I adopt, which is to pray Isha when the time occurs, whatever time it is. 11:15, 11:30, 11:40, 12, 12:15, 12:30, goes all the way till 1 in the morning. Or, if that proves difficult, then push your Isha time right to the end of Isha before Fajr starts. You then pray Isha in the end of Isha time, wait 5-10 minutes, Fajr will start, and then you pray your Fajr. This is Jamasuri, praying Isha in the end time and praying Fajr in the beginning time. That's 2. Point 3 is is to pray Isha and Maghrib in Maghrib time, which is referred to as Jama Taqdeem. Even though, having said that, the Hanbali school, which is the most accommodating school, does not permit it due to tiredness or sleep. But we are living in a challenging circumstances and challenging times. If one was to adopt this third position of praying Isha in Maghrib time at Jama Taqdeem, then one would have to pray Maghrib, make the intention from joining Maghrib with Isha when starting the Maghrib, and it has to be prayed in sequence. Maghrib first, then Isha. To pray Isha immediately after Maghrib, leaving no time in between. So one cannot pray the Sunnah Muakkada or Nafil in between, nor sit for dhikr or talking. Some time can be given for quick wudu, or something can be said about the prayer. And the Sunnah will be prayed in order after the Fard of Isha. And finally, the Sharia compliant reason is in existence at the beginning of both prayers, as has been mentioned previously, even though tiredness is not mentioned as one of these reasons. However, due to the great general difficulty because of the lateness of Isha based on our distance from the equator, we accept it as one in our circumstances. And then we have some lengthy ibarat that I have here for you to text, Arabic text for you to look at, in which we discuss this, the Jama Taqdeem, in great detail. Okay, next point. Well, what about when Isha time does not exist at all? So the fourth position. Well, between the days of May the 26th to July the 26th, which is a total of 52 days, then when acting upon the Hanafi school, it should be prayed before Fajr in Fajr time. That is the Hanafi school. Prayed in Fajr time, before Fajr. So of the three positions discussed above, position one is, now when I'm talking about discussed above, I'm referring to the options that I gave when Ash-Shafaqa Ahmad exists, but it is after 11 p.m. We're referring to that, which is on page 43. So when I'm discussing on page 49, that's what I'm referring to. So it says here, point one is no longer relevant. Point one is pray Isha when the start time occurs. Well, there is no start time, so one is out the window. Two, pray Isha at the end time and Fajr at the beginning time. Well, that's no longer relevant because Isha does not have a time, so it has no end time. So that only leaves the third, point three, which is Jama Taqdeem. That's obviously if you're not praying. The Hanafi position is to pray Isha in Fajr time. But if you haven't done that, then the only other option that's left of the other three is Jama Taqdeem, which is still technically Taqdeem as is being prayed before its time, but slightly different as in this case there is no Isha time. This can be acted upon in this circumstance. In fact, the Jama position is supported by what we've recorded by Imam Ahmad ibn Fadlan when he travelled to Bulghar, that Maghrib and Isha were prayed together. This is understood to be when Isha time does not come in at all. So the practice of Bulghar could be used in those times. Those who prayed at 11 p.m. may continue to do so during those days, acting upon the original fatwa, which is also based on one of the many views of the people of Bulghar. That's Isha dealt with, which to be honest was the complicated part. Fajr was relatively easier. Two recommendations. Fajr should be prayed after 15 degrees. This will ensure that according to the two positions, Fajr prayer is valid. Both agree that Fajr can be prayed after 15. Clearly this is the more correct view. However, between the following dates, which is from the 26th of May to the 17th of July, a total of 52 days, the sun does not reach 15 degrees. So what do you do now? So an alternative method is required from the previous discussion, which is adopting half the night. And that's also an opinion of the people of the Bulghar and is supported by astronomers. Suhoor should be to be made before 18. Okay, this will ensure that according to the two positions, the fast is valid. However, if an individual, especially in the months around summer, found the fasting difficult, then he could make suhoor up to 15 without blame. As the study has shown, this is the more correct view. In fact, one could switch from 18 to 15 when the sun's depression does not reach the angle. In other words, 18 degrees is understood as a position of taqwa and 15 as a position of fatwa. Similarly, when sun's depression does not reach 15, then as above, half the night can be adopted. So based on these recommendations, there is a timetable which I have enclosed with explanatory notes. Now, if you go to page 50, okay, on page 50 you'll see this timetable. So January is straightforward. I've got Fajr start time at 15, sunrise is sunrise, Isha start time at 18, and Suhoor end at 18. Okay, so that's Isha and Suhoor end. So Suhoor we're going by 18, Fajr by 15. So basically you stop eating at 6:13, okay, and you could pray Fajr after 6:34. You'll see that on there. And this is Greenwich Mean Time because we are not in BST yet. Okay. Similarly, in February, it was not a problem. Nice timetable, crystal clear, all easy to follow. Get into March, difficulties come in. Why? Because we switched to British summer time, and that takes place on the 27th or around that of March. That's going to take place this weekend. And then you see that we now start including Isha start time at 15. So for those who are okay with the Isha start time at 9:36, then so be it. But those who are struggling at 9:36 can now pray at 9:15. Okay, the hours are changing anyway, I've put here, and therefore it will minimize the effect of change and will be less noticeable. Carry on through April. Now we're on 15 degrees. Well, somebody could have adopted 15 degrees right from January, it wouldn't have been a problem. But this is the one I'm sort of proposing. And it's only when we get into May that problems arise. So from May the 27th, we have to go to Nisful Layl for Fajr. And from when we're looking at May the 6th, then there's two choices. One is Jama Taqdeem, which is in blue, and one is to pray Isha in its correct time, which is in black. And also I've said that this arbitrary figure of 11 p.m. that can also be used as well, which is the last time it came in, which was on the last time, which was on the 5th of May. So after the 6th of May, Isha is after 11 p.m. This is the explanatory notes on page 54. From this date until the 26th of May, Isha is present but considered late. Jama Taqdeem can be performed, however, if a sizable congregation can be achieved and those who can stay awake at home should pray Isha at its correct time. In the last few days, Isha should be prayed in Fajr time. Again, Jama Taqdeem is available. When Isha time does not occur at all, then the night is split into two, which is from May the 27th, as that's when Soul of Midnight takes place. And the start of the second half signifies Fajr start time and the end of Suhoor. And that's there to see. Okay. This carries on all the way through June. And also well into July. Isha time does start to come back in again on the July the 17th. But we're talking now about 1 o'clock in the morning. One can continue with Jama Taqdeem obviously at 9:31, 9:30 onwards, as we've seen as well. Again, it's best if you look at the timetables on the document that's there. And then normality comes back in around the 9th of August, in which Isha now is before 11 o'clock, so it's not a problem. No need for Jama Taqdeem, no need for anything else, no need for any gymnastics. All we could do is follow the timetable, and that carries on through to September. And then when we get into October, we switch back to GMT on the 30th of October, so we can go back to 18 degrees for Isha without feeling the change too much. November is all good, and as is December. And I have put a final point. I said these are recommendations for the ulama, and if one wishes to act upon them, then it should be in consultation with senior ulama possessing expertise in fiqh. Obviously, those not directly in contact with the ulama may act upon the findings after consultation with the author, or if you understand them, then so be it. One parting recommendation is that agreement is reached amongst the ulama, otherwise we will be like the people of Bulghar in more ways than one. And on that point, I'd like to leave it there. I hope you've had a better understanding now of the issues associated with Isha and Fajr, had a better understanding of the issues associated with different Sehri times and Fajr times during Ramadan, read the paper. If you need to watch the videos again, do so. And I hope I've played some part in trying to make that clear to you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
سبيل الدموع سبيل مريح تنهدى يا صاحي كي تستريح وبث الدعاء الخفي الصريح يسعك الفضاء